Hey guys, I'm Andrew Henderson, Nomad Capitalist, here in Tbilisi, Georgia, for another week or two. Wanted to talk about something that a lot of folks that I've worked with personally have discussed with me in one way or the other, and some have pretty strong feelings about it, some don't. But it's the issue of obtaining a second passport, specifically in Europe. And not just anywhere in Europe, but in the European Union. And so here at Nomad Capitalist, we help folks work towards their second passport, have some great success stories, and every once in a while someone will come up to me or be talking to me and say, Andrew, we really would like to get a passport in the European Union. And that's something that's absolutely possible, but what I want to talk about in this video is whether that's the right thing for you to do. And when I say you, I'm mainly talking about our Nomad Capitalist audience that comes from Western countries like the US, Canada, Australia, New Zealand. Now, obviously, the Western audience that is watching from Europe, unless you're in the UK in the future, you already have a European Union passport. But for those of us who were born outside of the EU, but in developed countries, what I found over the years is that the stick-to-itiveness, if you will, for actually doing what it takes to get that EU passport is just not there. And that's why a lot of times when I'm working with folks, I guide them towards getting what I call a Tier B passport. We talk about that in a separate video on YouTube. And the reason being is that getting an EU citizenship and the passport that goes with it requires one of two things. Generally requires either, number one, a lot of jumping through hoops and a lot of patience, or number two, a lot of money. Let's start with number two. There are companies all over the internet, you've probably seen them if you've been looking around for second passports, that advertise how they can get you a second passport in Portugal, or in Malta, or in Latvia, or any number of other EU countries. A number of these countries have offered various programs since the late 2000s. Hungary recently pulled its residency program, but in general, the list of programs has been relatively stable for the last several years. And what this generally involves is one of two things. In the case of Malta and Cyprus, you deposit a lot of money, or merely pay a lot of money, and you get a passport pretty darn quickly, in a matter of months or a year. Or you go to a country like Portugal where you buy €500,000 in real estate, hold on to it for 6 years, spend a little bit of time in the country, not necessarily incur any tax obligations, but you just kind of stick with Portugal for 6 years, or with Latvia for 10 years, or with any number of other countries. And for folks living the nomad capitalist lifestyle, this poses two problems. Number one, real estate yields in Portugal aren't necessarily that great. Taxes are high. They're a pain to fill out. There's so many different taxes, and so it just becomes a bit difficult. The second part is that while countries like Portugal don't require you to live there, some of the more affordable countries like Latvia do require you to live there if you want to get a passport. And obviously, you can become a citizen of pretty much any Western country by merely living there for 5 or 7 or 10 years, the same way you could get a US or Canadian or Australian passport. You merely do what you have to do to get in and then live there. But if you don't want to invest the money, and if you don't want to live there, then the more expensive turnkey options generally don't work for you. And all the companies that are investing money, millions of dollars, hosting conferences and buying ads in airports and all over the place, are mainly targeting, in my opinion, people in China, in Russia, in the Gulf. Not a ton of Americans. There are some. I have worked with folks who have bought economic citizenship programs, but mainly in the Caribbean. So that's number two, money. Okay, a lot of Western folks look at the idea of a European Union passport. They say, I want it fast. I don't want the hoops. I don't want the hassle. Well, you're probably looking, if you don't want to go and live somewhere, you're looking at a €500,000 investment, and you got to keep it there for a while. And that's something that a lot of Westerners don't want to do, especially when they come and hang out in the places that I'm hanging out, where they can get 10% in the bank or 20% on construction loans. And so then we say, okay, well, are we willing to jump through some hoops? We don't want to put €500,000 in because we're Westerners and we just don't see it as a good value for the money. Are we willing to jump through hoops? There are programs where you can go and start a business in the European Union with all of the nonsense and forms and bureaucracy that comes with it, and then slowly make your way towards getting a residency, and then slowly make your way towards renewing it, and then renewing it again, and maybe in 5 or 7 years you can get a passport. And there are a couple of these programs where you don't have to live there full time. But the challenge then is I ask people, okay, you want to stay living in the United States, or you want to live nomadically. You don't want to go and live in any one European country. Are you willing to start a company, run part of your revenues through that company, even if it's just a little bit, pay taxes on that, hire an accountant, maintain a registered office, make sure you check the mail every once in a while, talk to your banker once a year to keep him happy that the company's actually running, fill out all the forms, do all the nonsense, make sure that you're not liable to pay tax in that country, get a determination letter, do all the different stuff that's required. And the answer from a few folks that I've worked with is yes, we're willing to do that. Hey, it doesn't sound like it's that difficult. I like doing paperwork. And if your answer is yes, and that's cool, that's probably the best option for Westerners to deal with, unless you've just got €500,000 that you don't really care about getting a return on for a while, then that's probably the best option. For the average Westerner, the idea of tying up €500,000 and essentially making nothing on it after you count the government fees and then the taxes on the profits just isn't that appealing, because they already have a Western passport. They can already travel, and they're not necessarily looking forward towards, well, if I renounce my citizenship. And that's where the Tier B passport comes in. But on the other hand, the idea of saying, I want to jump through a lot of hoops, most people don't want that. Most people are trying to get a second passport to make their life easier. Take it from me as somebody who has way too many projects on his plate, between properties in countries all around the world, multiple businesses that he's running, multiple personal projects, helping my friends run their businesses. The last thing that I want is more hassle in terms of having to go and keep a company up to date every month to keep some country in the EU happy so that 5 or 7 years from now I can get a passport. I do have some personal experience with this. I can tell you it is not the most pleasant thing in the world. So if you're an American, an Australian, a Canadian, New Zealander, etc., can you get a European Union passport? You can. The question that I would ask if I were you is, number one, do I plan on renouncing my citizenship? And this is generally a question that's only reserved for US citizens, although there may come a time in your lifetime when Australia will go nuts with citizenship-based taxation too. But if you're a US citizen right now, okay, do you plan on really renouncing your citizenship? And if that's the case, can you live with a Tier B passport, or do you need to be an EU citizen? If you're not really planning on renouncing your citizenship, what's necessarily the point? Is it just an ego thing where I want the best? You can do that, and it's available, and you can go and invest €2 million in Cyprus, keep that money tied up for a while, and become a Cypriot citizen. Or you can go and donate €650,000 to Malta, and they'll make you Maltese pretty quickly. Or you can go invest €500,000 in Portugal. But when I work with folks, generally the issue is that they don't want to invest a lot of money. Either they're doing stuff on Amazon FBA or e-commerce where they're churning a lot of their money. They don't have that kind of money to invest because they're tripling their money every year buying new stock and creating new products. And so putting it in Portugal would be a total waste. Or they're just very conscious about how they invest their money because they know that there are better places to do it than making 5% in Portugal. If you want to buy a house and live in Portugal, that might work for you. But for everybody else, it's a lot of effort than just to go and do one of these turnkey EU programs. I love the programs. I think that they're great for a lot of different people. And it's something that you have to ask yourself when you say, I want to get a second passport. If you're thinking that I need the best, I need the EU, that's what I want. I will settle for nothing less. I couldn't possibly be Tier B because I'm not a Tier B person. Well, those are your two options. Either you invest or donate, or you jump through the hoops. And I'm not saying those options are bad. They're not bad at all, as a matter of fact. I think that they are some of the great programs for a certain type of people. But when you talk about getting a second passport and you're looking at a Tier A passport, understand that not only are the European countries actually some of the easier ones to deal with compared to the US, Australia, for example, where they often have more stringent standards. Europe is easier. Are you willing to deal with that? Are you willing to be patient? Are you willing to invest the money? Are you willing to invest the time? Are you willing to deal with the hassles? If so, then it's a great opportunity, and especially if you're one of those US citizens thinking I may renounce, I would go with it. I get started soon before they make it more difficult. But if you're not willing to put up with all that, and you are a Western citizen, and you're thinking you'll probably keep your current passport, then more of an insurance policy from a Tier B country, where you can actually get a good return on your money, and there's not a lot of hassle, is probably a better fit for you. If you want to find out more about how to get the clarity in your particular situation, you can go to nomadcapitalist.com. If you want some personal help, you can apply for help with the big green button there at the top of the page.